Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Suburban Proletarian. My name is Greg. It's been a busy couple of weeks, both at work. There's been a lot going on at both of my jobs, and I did take some time to post up a couple of new videos over at the Suburban Rifleman, our sister channel, so you may want to go check those out if you haven't already done so. But I've been kind of chomping at the bit to get back here and put some new content on this channel. And I have a little bit of time this afternoon. I didn't really have anything prepared, but I want to take a look at a Casio digital watch. This is a pretty basic and fairly inexpensive digital watch, but it's a little bit unusual. It's not as weird as some of the other digital watches we've looked at on the channel in the past. But of course, I'm talking about the Casio DW-290. This has appeared in a couple of my previous videos, and I think I mentioned I wanted to make a standalone video about it, so we're going to do that today. If you take a look at the watch, the DW290 looks an awful lot like a G-Shock, but it is not a G-Shock, and it was never intended to be a G-Shock. Occasionally, dealers will actually ship these things packaged in G-Shock tins, but it's from a completely different series of watches. I've seen it referred to as a pre-shock, which would indicate that it was something that came along before the G-Shock. But although the design is about 30 years old or so at this time, the G-Shock is actually about 40 years old now. Well, almost 40 years old. So it doesn't predate the G-Shock. I've seen other people describe it as an almost G-Shock or a not quite G-Shock. I don't think that really does justice to the watch either. So I want to take a look at it and give you my thoughts on it over on the tabletop. One thing that is interesting about this watch is it's a movie watch. This is the watch that Tom Cruise wore on his wrist in Mission Impossible 1, the very first movie. And it was incorrectly identified for many years. That watch was incorrectly identified for many years as a Casio DW-5300, I believe. It's another older square model. It's even more square than the 5600. But as often happens, it wasn't until the movie was released on Blu-ray and people, sharp-eyed watch enthusiasts with a freeze frame, could take a better look at the watch. Same thing that happened with the colors of James Bond's nylon watch strap in Goldfinger. That had been misidentified for years. And somebody realized that this was the actual watch that Tom Cruise wore in the movie. In the second Mission Impossible movie, Tom Cruise again wore a Casio. That time it actually was a G-Shock. I don't remember the model number. In subsequent movies, either Swatch Group or Richemont sort of poached the franchise from Casio, and Tom Cruise's character has been wearing higher-end Swiss watches in the most recent movies. And again, I don't remember which ones, but anyway, that's out of the topic of our conversation. Let's go over to the tabletop and take a look at the DW290, and I'll give you my thoughts on it, and I'll be doing a little bit of that speculation that some of you seem to love to hate. Let's do it. Alright guys, so here is the DW290. I promise I'm not going to make this very long. It's a fairly simple watch. I just want to cover a couple of aspects of it and give you my thoughts a little bit on it. So let's get the dimensions out of the way right away. It has, wow, a 46.5 millimeter case diameter. That's pretty darn big. I never would have guessed that, though. It doesn't seem to wear that large. It does sort of have traditional case lugs, and the strap is 16.8 millimeters in diameter, so we're going to call that a 17 millimeter lug width. From the top of the bezel ring to the case back is 14.2 millimeters, so it's fairly high. So you can understand immediately why people often associate this with G-Shocks. It is a Casio. It's big, it's sporty looking, it's very rugged, and it does share some design characteristics with several G-Shocks. It does share the G-Shock's 200-meter water resistance. I've seen one of these opened up. It does have some shock resistance. There's a few small foam pads built in around the module, but it doesn't have the full shock resistance of the G-Shock. Also, G-Shocks have a soft urethane rubber, what Casio refers to as a bezel, but I would call it a shell or a housing. This soft urethane rubber that goes over the outside of the hard nylon plastic watch case. This watch, the DW290, just has that hard nylon watch case. There's no rubberized overmolding. Well, actually, it's not even overmolding. It's actually a separate part on the G-Shock. It's sort of a rubber jacket that fits over the outside of the actual watch case. So they're similar in some ways, but they're quite different in others. And in fact, I would say that, you know, if you look at these are from roughly the same time period as far as their time of introduction. This is the F91W. Of course, the DW290 and the F91W come from the same sort of time period, late 80s, early 90s. They share a lot of the same design philosophy with the colors running around the dial, lots of use of blues and reds. Occasionally you'll see greens used the same way on Casio. But you can really think of the DW290 as being more like a massively beefed up F91W than as a cheapskate answer for the G-Shock. So, as I said, it features 200 meters of water resistance, and I think that's very important in our assessment of the watch. G-Shock prices have actually come down quite a bit in the last 30 years. They were relatively more expensive in the money of the day than they are today. And I think this watch was basically brought out as an alternative to the G-Shock for somebody who kind of wanted that 200 meters of water resistance and wanted a rugged watch, but didn't want to shell out the cash that it took to get a G-Shock at the time. This one's always had a screw-on sheet stainless case back. It has these large exposed stainless steel buttons, and those have been described as a design oversight on the part of Casio's engineers when they designed the watch, that most G-Shocks have shrouded or recessed buttons that are hard to inadvertently press. These are not only not recessed, they stick out very prominently, and they're very large in diameter. As a matter of fact, you could probably operate these even if you were wearing something like neoprene gloves, which I think is sort of a key to what the designers were thinking when they designed this watch. It seems pretty clear to me when I look at this watch that the design philosophy was that of a dirt cheap dive watch. It wasn't meant to be a G-Shock competitor. I mean, G-Shock, Casio already had the G-Shock market cornered. Why would they bring out a cheaper competitor for their own watches? And of course, G-Shocks are quite popular with divers as well, both civilian divers and military divers. But this, I think, was really designed for someone who needed a dive watch, a watch that could be used in and around the water, even for light recreational diving, to keep track of their oxygen supply and things like that without shelling out the relatively large amount of money it took to buy a G-Shock back in the early 90s. And that's really the full extent of this watch. The styling has been criticized, that the design is just really, really weird. It's sort of hexagonal, sort of a squished hexagon. And I would agree it is a little bit weird. We do have regular timekeeping feature. We've got an alarm. I think it's just a single alarm I think it's just a single alarm. We've got a countdown timer, which I have set for 30 minutes for timing baking pizzas. We've got a stopwatch. I think it's just a single stopwatch with one lap time, and back to timekeeping mode. So, yeah, I don't really know that I have an awful lot more to say about it. It's a cool, funky watch that dates from the 1990s. Oh, one thing is this strap. As was the case with a lot of dive watches, Seiko did this as well. At that time period, they put these sort of accordion pleats in a rubber watch strap. And the idea was to give the strap a little bit of flex. If the watch gets hooked on something or the strap gets hooked on something while you're wearing it, there's a little bit of flex there to take some of the stress off of the spring bars and keep either the case lugs or the spring bars from failing. This G-Shock here has a similar sort of style. It's got these accordion pleats in here. But the DW290 has some of the most extreme pleats I've ever seen. And actually, these, if you look at the back of the G-Shock, the pleats are much more in line with the inside surface of the strap than they are here. These things can really dig into your wrist and become quite uncomfortable. They can be some really serious hot spots. And as a result, I wear this watch more loosely on my wrist than I do with my G-Shock, for instance. If I had one real criticism of the DW290, it would be this really poor strap design. And that's, I mean, just look how far those stick down. You literally, if you wear this watch fairly tight on the wrist, when you take it off, you'll have dents there where it's biting into your wrist. And, I don't really like that. Other than that, I think it's a cool 1990s vintage design watch. It's still in production today. Casio announced its discontinuation like 2 or 3 years ago. But as far as I know, it's still available on a retail basis pretty much everywhere. There is a movie connection. If you like the Mission Impossible films, you're going to get this a hell of a lot cheaper than any watch that James Bond has ever worn. So that's kind of cool. I guess that's about it. As with most of their economy watches, it has a plastic buckle instead of stainless steel. Of course, most of your G-Shocks feature stainless steel buckles, so that's kind of cheesy. But I haven't had it fail yet. I've worn this watch quite a bit. A lot of people don't like this teal printing on here, and apparently you can just take some, you don't want to use anything too aggressive, but something like mineral spirits, and that'll wipe right off. I've heard that it wears off quite quickly. I've been careful not to have it wear off because I feel like it's part of that like 1980s Casio design aesthetic that I really dig so much. I paid like $24 for this a couple of years ago. I think they've gone up a little bit, but I think you can still get them like on Amazon for less than 30 bucks. So, all right, let's go wrap this up. So whatever the design intent was for the DW290, it is a pretty cool watch. It's a movie watch that you can get for a lot less than most movie watches. So that's kind of cool. And it's just a darn good rugged duty watch in general, but specifically a plastic digital watch for recreational scuba diving. It's the cheapest dedicated dive watch I can think of that comes from a reputable manufacturer and would probably work and serve you very well for years of recreational swimming, snorkeling, diving, that sort of stuff, and even as an everyday watch. Again, the strap is not the most comfortable. As a matter of fact, it's maybe the least comfortable rubber strap that I've ever come across. It does, you will get used to it, and the watch can be a good everyday watch. I certainly don't wear it as my daily watch, but it is in the daily rotation. I do wear this watch fairly frequently. I hope that this video has proved helpful to somebody out there. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel. It goes a long way to help keep me here on the tube. If you're already a subscriber, like, share, tell your friends, click the little bell icon down below. That'll allow YouTube to push notifications to you when I post new content to the channel. And when I do that, I hope to see each one of you here then. Later, guys!